Greetings, fellow humans, and welcome to a new episode of Emily Making Stuff. So here's the deal. For Christmas, a good friend of mine bought me a very interesting book called Veg in One Bed, which is about how to grow, 16 different crops across a year in a 4-foot by 10-foot raised vegetable bed. Part of that process is that you need somewhere to propagate seedlings, and in the book it says that some of the best places to do that are east-facing windows. Now in our house there are only 2 east-facing windows. One of them is directly behind the sink in the kitchen. It is a small window with an astonishingly tiny windowsill. The other east-facing window is in this room that we are currently in. The place that I do the filmings, and also our office and sewing room. It's a small room that we do a lot of stuff in, okay? So there's a window there. But it's a strange space. The windowsill isn't wide enough to actually propagate seedlings on, and also our younger cat, Twig, likes to jump up there. So if any seedlings were put on that windowsill, it would be very likely that they would get knocked off it. So a wider area that we can place seedlings is necessary. But the space that exists there is strange from a measurements perspective also. So basically you'd need something that was a metre wide, 72 centimetres tall maximum, and like 30 centimetres deep. They don't really make tables that size, so I decided, potentially ill-advisedly, to use materials that I can find amongst our belongings and in our local area to create a piece of furniture that will fit that space. The main thing that inspired this idea of building my own thing was I found a piece of MDF in our shed. So I thought that this would be perfect, and I cut that piece down to size. We also have a wooden bed frame that belonged to Hamish that I think he got off Free Cycle about 2 years ago and was starting to slowly die. Now we were just going to break the pieces of the bed down and turn them into like firewood. I looked at the cost of buying table legs on the internet. It costs so much to buy table legs. It is more expensive for me to buy table legs than it is for me to buy a table. Like, the table element is more expensive. The individual item is more expensive than an actual thing. I was very upset about this, and suddenly it occurred to me that the 2 side pieces for the bed could probably easily be cut down into appropriate table legs. So I went to work, measuring and marking up where I was going to cut the 2 bed pieces. I decided that I would try to create one really wide leg on each side that I would reinforce with crossbeams. I also decided to make them 70 centimetres tall so that the table would clear the radiator but still sit snugly under the windowsill. I used my super cute panda ruler that my mum gave me to help mark out where I needed to saw. Unfortunately, the only saw that we have is a hand saw, so I did my best to follow the line I'd drawn and keep the saw as straight as possible so that the legs would be as close to square as I could get them. Partway through the first cut, it started to rain. Really? God damn it. So I packed up all the filming equipment as I didn't want that getting wet, and went back outside to finish the other cuts later. Then I had to figure out how to give the table a little bit more structural integrity. I found something that looked like it might have been intended to be a stair banister that was about 2 meters long. One end of it had begun to rot, so I cut it to the length that I would need it to see if it was salvageable, and it was fine, so I decided to use it. To get the tabletop and the stretcher to match the legs, I dug a can of gloss white spray paint out of the shed and went to work. I learned from the internet that the best way of applying spray paint is doing multiple thin layers and getting them just dry enough to touch in between each coat, and then leaving them to fully dry for 24 hours after the final coat. I ended up doing 4 coats of paint on the stretcher and 5 coats on the MDF tabletop. I brought them inside to fully dry because I was afraid that it was going to start raining again, and as the MDF had already gotten a little bit soggy once, I didn't really think it would survive a second drenching. When everything was dry and ready, I moved all the pieces of the table to the back room as I thought it would be easier to build it in situ than to transport it up our stairs. I also grabbed the drill bits, the screws, and a screwdriver. And it was time to measure and mark up once again. I had cut 2 small pieces that were about 22 centimetres wide to secure the leg pieces that were on each side of the table.
Honestly, because these were so small and I don't have a bench or clamps, these were genuinely the hardest thing to cut. I also measured the stretcher and decided where I was going to sink the screws so I could accurately mark on the table legs where I needed to drill. And I marked where on the tabletop I would need to drill to attach the tabletop to the table legs. And then it was time to drill. To protect our floors, I set myself up on top of a cardboard box so that it didn't matter if I drilled too far through anything. It's tough to see in this shot, but the little baby crossbeam is under the legs because I wanted all the holes to match as well as they could. I then went to screw in the screws with the screwdriver and ran into my first big problem. The crosshead bits were all completely stripped from when Hamish fixed the fence. We do have another set of drill bits as well, but
You don't have any idea where the other drill bits are, do you?
they'd been missing for a while, so I swapped to a different screwdriver and I soldered on. Unfortunately, that screwdriver was actually too small for the screws I was using, so after fighting to get 2 screws sunk, I went on a mission to find the other crosshead bits. And after enlisting Hamish's help and searching through the whole of the back room, the shed, under our bed, the coal bunker, the understairs cupboard, and the entire kitchen without success, I went on a second pass of some of the more obvious places the screw bits could be hiding. I succeeded, and 2 hours after starting to look for them, I found the drill bits in the understairs cupboard inside a plastic bag full of steel wool, for some bizarre reason. I finished drilling into and screwing together the first leg and crossbeam with assistance from a tiny electric screwdriver, did the same on the second leg piece, and then decided to be a smart cookie and do a test fit in the space to make sure that it would all go together properly, which is where I ran into my second big problem.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh, but how? I measured
again, and the measurements were right, so I did some shifting and managed to get the stretcher in place, but something was not right. Something was quite wrong.
Oh dear, oh dear. And that angle isn't a right angle. And this one, that one's closer. Okay, let's go do some sanding.
So I did some sawing and a lot of sanding, and I tried to get the end of the stretcher square. I then brought in Hamish to consult.
Basically, this now does fit in here.
Yeah.
Which is lovely.
Yes.
But this needs to be on top of, you can see it.
Yeah.
It's got like a good 2 centimetres. And if I try to move this under the thing, it's really clearly straining. So I was thinking about moving this upward because there's significantly more space here.
Yes.
Compared to where the baseboards are. Do you think?
Yep.
Okay, in that case I need to figure out placement. And if I'm doing that, I think it's probably better to attach this first.
Yes.
And then put the top on.
Agreed.
Cool. That's what we'll do then.
I measured everything up for the new stretcher placement, marked up where I needed to place the necessary holes, which ended up looking a little bit like a face, and got to drilling with moral support and direction from Hamish.
Now drill his eyes out.
Alright, Psycho.
I decided that to make correctly lining up the pieces easier, I was going to start off the screws in the leg pieces and get the ends of them protruding slightly from the inside of the leg so that I could easily slot them into the corresponding holes in the stretcher. I lined it all up and screwed the first leg and stretcher together and then did exactly the same thing on the other leg. I then drilled holes in the leg so that I could screw the tabletop on, and while the first leg went absolutely fine, on the second leg I ran into my third big problem.
Well, the drill bit broke. Broke. Like, in the hole I was drilling. Snapped.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we grabbed a pair of pliers and tried to prise the broken drill bit out of the hole, whereupon it broke. Again. But this time the broken piece left behind was small enough that it was inside the table leg, so instead of fighting it, I just let that drill bit be and moved where the hole was going to go. I drilled the necessary holes in the tabletop and again sunk the screws part way so I could line the holes up easily. I attached one side of the table but left the screws quite loose, and because the MDF was a little bit warped, I had to use a cardboard shim on the other side to persuade the leg of the tabletop to meet and attach. I sunk and tightened all the screws and carefully shuffled the table into its proper place.
So, we have a table. The new table. It is a table. It functions. I've ended up putting like a tiny support in the middle of it to like stop the cat from destroying it if she jumps on it with particular intensity. At the moment it's just covered in succulents, candles and recording equipment, but it is pretty useful. Although it is not the most beautiful item of furniture that has existed or I own, I'm quite proud of it. To basically create an item of furniture entirely from scrap and from scratch, and make a functional item of furniture that we can use that fits the space it was intended to, only using a handsaw, some questionable drill bits and screwdrivers, and an old can of spray paint. I think I did a pretty good job, and I think it is a passable item of furniture. I don't think someone would look at that and go, oh yeah, all of that was destined for the scrap heap. It is also pretty cool that because we got the bed off FreeCycle and because I found the MDF and the support beam, the only things that I needed to make it that I actually paid for were the paint and the screws. I think I did a good job. I'm happy with it. Anyway, if you liked this video, then please like it. It's pretty straightforward. If you would like to see other stuff that I put out, then hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I hope you enjoyed whatever nonsense this was, and I hope I'll see you guys next time. Big love.